Good morning. It's early here on the Barnhardt Trail going up the rugged Mazatzal Mountains. And I'm going to break here for a bit to talk some anime.
Gunslinger Girl 2, Il Teatrino.
Back in 2003, Madhouse Studios produced the anime Gunslinger Girl, based on the manga of Jii-san. 5 years later, a completely different animation team has created a sequel. Il Teatrino has a slightly different focus and vastly different style from its predecessor, and it took a while for me to adjust my expectations accordingly, but in the end I still found it a worthwhile watch. This is a sequel and continues to follow the manga from where the first series left off. A quick voice-over explanation about 10 minutes into the story will set the premise for you. A secret Italian intelligence branch called the Social Welfare Agency has created a handful of young girls who have been cybernetically enhanced and trained as the ultimate assassins. Each of these bionic tweens has a handler she's been brainwashed to obey. Despite that quick intro, some of the new stories refer to elements from the first series, so you really shouldn't start on Gunslinger Girl with Il Teatrino. The first series focused on a few of the young assassins and their relationships to their handler. This sequel expands the storytelling to include a much broader cast, both at the Social Welfare Agency and among the terrorists themselves. And it also gives a lot of flashbacks to fill in characters' backgrounds. At the SWA, the main focus shifts a bit to Triella, their oldest assassin, and her handler, Hillshire. Henrietta is still important, and we get some additional background on her handler, Josie. The other girls all get some story time as well, but the most significant change is to include a few of the actual terrorists in the storyline. In the first series, the terrorists and their activities were just a foil to the stories of the girls, faceless enemies to give them occasional shooting practice. Here, they're developed into fully realized characters with goals, personalities, and backgrounds. The terrorists are a northern Italian separatist movement called the Five Republics faction, or Padanians. They're a lot wealthier than the usual terrorist groups. Pinocchio, or Pino for short, is a young man adopted by one of the wealthy Padian bosses and raised as an assassin. Pino serves as a mirror image to Triella and the other SWA assassins, both starving for affection. Working with him on a plot to destroy a bridge are two freelance bombers. One, who now calls herself by the codename Franca, is out for revenge for her father. In order to learn her trade as a bomb maker, she coaxed Franco, a veteran bomb maker, out of retirement. Both Franca and Franco had very brief cameo appearances in the first series, but weren't significant characters, and I don't even think they were given names then. Where the first series didn't have much of a running story, here there is a single story running slowly through the entire series. Il Teatrino is fundamentally about the SWA versus the terrorists and their bomb plot, which isn't to say the anime doesn't take plenty of time to explore some side stories involving the characters on both sides of the conflict. It focuses specifically about a rivalry between Triella and Pinocchio, for although Pinocchio hasn't been augmented with cybernetic speed and strength, he still seems capable of giving the bionic girl a good fight.
Mate!
My biggest disappointment with Il Teatrino was the art and animation. This time, Artland produced the animation, and it's nowhere near as sophisticated and beautiful as Madhouse's earlier effort. The backgrounds are simpler, the scenery lacks depth and shading, and everything is less detailed. Italy just isn't as grandly beautiful. Also, the animation isn't as fluid in the action scenes. A lot of the illusion of action is now achieved by putting speed lines rushing along the edges. It practically screams low budget, especially during the early episodes. For some reason, I thought the animation seemed to improve towards the end of the series. The character designs have changed too, simpler and with wider eyes. Everyone is still recognizable, of course. They come from the same manga after all. But the faces just don't have the same subtlety of expression. Because of the change in art style, when they did use flashbacks to the original series events, they had to redraw those scenes. In some ways, this is a simpler and more direct translation of the story from Uida's manga, which isn't surprising since Uida wrote the screenplay and did the storyboards for much of the series. It's not bad for what it is, it just isn't in the same class and the moody style of its predecessor. Whereas the Gunslinger Girls have pretty simple motivations to please their handlers and other SWA members, and the terrorists have far more complicated motivations to explore this time around. By expanding the cast, Il Teatrino doesn't get to concentrate on any of the characters quite as much, but it does get to take time to explore half a dozen characters' backgrounds. By giving us some characters on opposite sides of the conflict, it can draw some interesting parallels between them and take a look at other concepts. If it wasn't for the first series, you might not be quite so sure which side you were rooting for.
Pinocchio, explain to us what's going on.
What do you mean? I have to kill her now. She's seen your faces.
Hold on. It's not that big of a deal, all right? You know, I'm the one who chooses who we kill.
Ko Otani provides the background music this time, and it's a more conventional soundtrack suitable for an action story. It's not bad, just not as original or haunting as its predecessor, and it's a little disappointing for Haibani Renmei's composer. It's supplemented by other music, such as the English ballad Scarborough Fair and some classical arias from Tosca. Director Hiroshi Ishidori has plenty of experience making disappointing sequels dating back to his work on Bubblegum Crash. I was surprised the Japanese voice cast was all different too. On the other hand, Funimation used the same voice cast for their English dub as they did for the first series, and that voice cast sounded fine for me and more familiar. When I started watching Gunslinger Girl 2, Il Teatrino, I was hoping for a sequel in the same vein as the original Gunslinger Girl. Measured by that, Gunslinger Girl 2 falls far short of its predecessor. That said, I still liked Il Teatrino, just not as much. It's not trying to be the same kind of series. It doesn't have the same sense of emotional connection. It's more straightforward an action-adventure, but it's a solid story, and it's pretty well told, and the characters are still interesting. I give Gunslinger Girl 2 Il Teatrino 4 stars. It's not a thematic or emotional descendant of its predecessor, but it's still an interesting story from the same author, and it has an even larger cast of sympathetic characters. Whereas the original took the source material and heightened it to something much more sublime, this version simply tells the story in a workmanlike fashion. I would have preferred Madhouse's animation, but I like the story and characters enough to get over that disappointment. The story is complete in just 13 episodes, telling the Pinocchio arc from the manga. There's still plenty of manga left. Maybe yet another studio can do a third season someday. I first saw Il Teatrino with subtitles streamed from Funimation's website. I liked it enough to pick up their 2-DVD box set. It contains the 13-episode TV series, but not the 2 direct-to-video side stories. I'm told those are scheduled for later this year. The 2 DVDs have minimal extras, though it does have an interview with the Japanese voices for Bruno and Angelica. Strangely, that interview says it's the second of 5 such shows, and I wonder why Funimation picked just that one.
Thanks for watching.